G'day, this is Chris and this is flattankjourney. Welcome back. Welcome to Project Velocette. I've had a good time. This week I've spent a few days thinking about the little Velo and where I'm at. And I've actually hit a point where I've got a few problems. I've got a few problems with the gearbox mainly. I'm missing a whole piece and my searches for that have been fruitless, really fruitless. I'm missing clutch parts and that's been a bit fruitless too. So you sort of have to put it aside and keep searching. The engine, now the engine's not too bad, but the piston's a very snug fit. It is a two-stroke and I don't know whether it's the right piston or not. So I'm going to get some advice about that. It's missing its oil measuring system. So in the 20s, Velocette appeared to have had a system that you put oil in the engine case and there was a metering system that added it into the crankcase and you ended up with two-stroke fuel virtually. Still a constant loss thing, you had to fill it. Now, advice from the Velocette owners group and someone who had one was just use modern two-stroke fuel. Just mix it up ever so slightly rich and forget the oiling system, you're never going to find one. So that suited me really well and says that, I have compression, I have a piston, rings, and I have an engine that potentially will work. I have a magneto. Now, of course, it'll need rebuilt, so that's not a problem. I'm missing all the timing gear and the drive sprocket off it. And my searches for that have been a bit fruitless too. So that's a bit of a worry. I have the flywheel, of course, and that seems to be okay. So I'm well short some pieces, but I need to push on and I need to do something. So I've decided to blow the bike apart and paint all powder. At this stage, I think I'm going to do powder, but you'll find out at the end, I suppose. I'm going to paint the tank, paint the guards, a few smalls, and powder the rest. I'm going to leave the wheels alone for now because I don't want to drop $1,000 into wheels and tyres and having them rebuilt. I'm going to have a bike that doesn't run for 2-3 years. Who knows? I don't know when I'll find the parts I'm looking for. A little bit elusive. So, hope you enjoy it. I'm going to blow this thing apart and then we'll see what we got at the end. You can see part of it here. A job I've been ignoring for ages because I didn't want to accept that it wasn't right and I'd made a mistake was the handlebars and the first attempt at re-necking that I did. Now, it looks like it's 7/8. But it's a hair less. Now, I don't know whether it's been compressed by the head stock fitting or what it is, but it's a hair under. Now, this first one, it measures 22.08. And this first one, I made 21.80. Now, you can cinch it up, but you can't even wheel the bike around. It's actually really difficult. Now, 7/8 measures 22.15 or something like that. So I've shaved it to, well, it varies a little bit, but it's 22 mil. So I took 0.15 of a millimetre off, but it's still 0.2 bigger than the first one. Now, again, these are minuscule measurements that you would think would tighten out. Now, I created a shoulder to sit inside the bars and a tiny plug to go through into the top because I think somebody drilled this for one of those sliding angular bar holders like on a bicycle. But I don't think that's the way this is meant to be because this has a split in the tube that comes up and a pinch bolt on the top. And I think that's how the bars are meant to be held. I'm happy to be corrected, or maybe it was both. But so I've just used solid and now it taps in. Well, it doesn't even tap in, it pushes in. So it needs welded, and it needs welded certainly on the top, and I think you'd get pretty good go. but it needs welded around here, and I think that's a TIG weld job, and I think it's a job for a professional. 2 reasons: I want it to look really clean, and the second reason is I want to be safe, because I'm not a good welder. We all remember that. Let's get this back in the bike and have a look and see if we can tighten it up. I'm sure I can, because I've tried, but again, we're talking about 0.2 of a millimetre. 10th, is that how it works? Don't know. Let's have a look. Around one side and I'm around the other. So the nut goes back on. Now this just fits. Now I actually left a tiny little shoulder on it, so this bit is actually 7/8, and just below it is 0.2 of a millimetre less. Now I can see already that it's much better, because I've got this pinch bolt loosened right off, and I know that when I tighten that up, I'm going to get a better result. Now I will have to tack weld the bars in, because otherwise the bars are going to turn not in the headstock but on that spigot, whatever we want to call it. That's a much better result, much better. I am going to tack those in place, so we'll come back after Chris has put a couple of really solid blobs of weld on that. A little bit of weld and haze, but overall I didn't do a terrible job, which is always good for me. Bars will now tighten up, or at least I hope they do. Yeah, that's tighter. I actually feel like it should be 7/8, and that I've just got crap caught down. But that's much better. That actually works. I'll show you what I've done. Not complicated. I didn't show you the welds, just the flap disc result. There we go. So you can't really tell anymore. You can see a couple of imperfections or porosity or whatever they call it, and I'm just pulling that hard to get that to straighten up. But I think once I've got this in the right place and tightened everything down, we'll get a really good result. Or at least I think that's how they go. The bars aren't in horrible nick. They've got a flat spot underneath where somebody has beaten the life out of them by the look of it. But I think they're worthy of getting the neck welded in now and painting them, because I think they should be black. They'll come up all right. Next thing on my agenda is to get the seat off. Now, I've had the seat on for ages because I like looking at it whole and complete. But when we look at the whole thing, I think you can see, and now I can see, I didn't see it before, the springs are different. They shouldn't be, I'm sure. I'm going to take the seat frame off and take it to Daryl from Daz's Seat Repairs in Geelong and have a talk to him about it and see if he can help me with what he thinks the correct spring might be. So I'm going to get this apart. Now this has already been apart at some stage because somebody's gone to the trouble of blasting and priming the seat frame. Now these probably appear to be original little nuts. There's a spring washer on one but not on the others. I'm going to pull all these off. There's there's 8 of them, and then we'll have a look at it. Okay, not super difficult. There's the seat frame. This piece articulates from 2 points really at the front. Strange. I suppose they were looking for some give in the whole thing because, you know, you were sort of rocking and rolling on the old roads. You can see that the springs are very much different. This has got 8 turns in it. This has got more like 10 turns in it, but it's even a heavier gauge wire to the eye. That's going to go off to Daryl for a little bit of love. I am going to try and keep the original cover, or what I think might be an original cover or an older recover. But I'll take it to him for his opinion. I've been applying Daz's seat goo to it. Daz has a compound he puts on leather, and I've been putting glycerine on it at his recommendation. So it's still as hard as my head. So we'll see where we go. I'm going to put the nuts back on so I don't lose them. Tank's only held in those 4 bolts that we talked about ages ago. And if you haven't seen the start of this little project, go back and see what she looked like. She was a little bit rough when we got her. It's coming along okay now. So there's just 4 bolts. They go through, lugs on the frame, and we'll see those in a minute. And then they go into the bottom of the tank. Now, inherently, this is a failure point of early 20s bikes, mid 20s, that the bottoms of the tanks end up breaking. That's a fatigue point, and they found different ways to do it. Tank should and does just slide out. I'll put that on the bench. Just picking up the hardware. Not sure where I should put this at the minute, but certainly I need to containerise it and get it in a good place. And here you can see a flat bar with lugs that are firmly held in place. These footboards will come out really easily. They certainly go in easily when you get them in the right place. So 2 big nuts on this side. Once we've undone the other side, it'll just all slide out. Spacer drops down. Now this spacer will be tightly encapsulated because it's the bottom bolt. I'm going to put those aside because I'm going to paint those. I'm going to try and make those disappear. Back on the other side, I'm just going to pick up these spacers. Put the spacers back where they came from. And the footboard as well. And as I'm doing all this around here, I realise this is completely useless to you because you can't see it. But there you go. Footboards back together with all the hardware, and I'll put them aside. The brake pedal assembly is next to come out. And that's probably one of my proudest moments on this bike, weirdly. And most of this will need to go for nickel plating, sadly. I think that's the right outcome for it. But for now, it can go aside. The spacer I'm going to paint. And I'm also going to paint the pedal. And I'm going to paint the bar that it all sits on as well. There's my brake assembly, and with a bit of luck, I'll be able to get these two half nuts undone. I don't really want to paint the nuts. I think the nuts could be less steel or steel looking. Painted nuts have a tendency to just pull the paint off, and then they look like crap once you pull the paint off. Best think about getting the engine out, put it aside, and resolve this complex mess of hardware down here where all of this mounts. I'm hoping that all of this, as I said, disappears a little bit and looks less clumsy when I've painted it, welded the nuts to one end and made bolts. Now, I could just go and buy 3/8 Whitworth bolts, but I don't want to. So that sort of puts an end to that discussion. And there's always the one that just sticks a little bit. Let me get a punch and I'll just tap it out. I don't know whether there's a burr in the frame or what there is just there, but it doesn't like to come out smoothly. So I'm going to put the brackets aside and these aside. I'm going to weld these, the end of them, and turn them into bolts. How will it go? Not really sure. Paint. These front little brackets are no trouble at all. I don't think I need to weld it and turn it into a bolt. I actually like the look of it as a stud, and I think it works pretty well. Works pretty well when it comes apart properly. Well, let me scoop up all this hardware from those mounting points, and we'll put that in the tub as well. The engine can come out for now as well. I don't see any point in faffing about with it any longer. Now, it's not a bad little engine, but it's not super. I'm yet to actually decide whether the piston fits the barrel or not. got our little interruption, but there's the bars coming off, and I think I'll get the bar end levers off and take these to someone to tidy that weld up, or to actually weld it. I've taken the hardware off one side of the front end, and you know what? Some of it looks as though it stands half a chance of being original. Now, this is a promising sign. This side is left-hand thread. I don't think anyone's been into this and messed with it. Yeah, and that's got a bit of nickel on it too. Interesting hardware on the front end. So really important that I keep these away from regular hardware so that we can just recognise what's left-handed and what's not. Well, I've always thought the front end was in quite good condition. This might take a little more encouragement and a little more patience than I thought. There we go, now we're moving. Now it's just as well I took that apart. Not a bearing in sight. Not a bearing in sight. That's as dry as. Oh, what a tragedy. How funny is that? No bearings, nothing. Well, there's one thing we'll have to sort out. What size bearings do I need? And where am I going to get them from? Dear, dear, dear. That was just a surprise. So I was avoiding taking that out because, you know, bearings go everywhere. But who'd have thought there'd be no bearings? These need a blast, and they're probably going for powder. Don't know. Maybe paint. Just about every tool I own now, I think. But, you know, everything's coming out. Lots of it is stuff I put in and cleaned up, so that's not a big deal. We'll get the rear stand off and we'll be good. Rightio. There's the bolt behind the seat stem, undone. Now weirdly, the rear of the frame doesn't come off. So that bolt is only really a pinch bolt. Sort of a bit intrigued. They obviously sweated the frame together after they'd done this, and then pushed the whole thing in as an assembly and sweated it together, because you can't get the rear of the frame off unless I'm missing something. But there's my attempt at a seat stem, and that's another one of those things that I don't really like it, and I'll probably make another one when I get this back. Rightio, I'm standing in pretty much what's left of the Velocette. And this is how I hate bikes, as I've told you before, when they're all blown apart and they look terrible. But these are the bits I'm going to send off for powder. So the frame, obviously, the front end, which I actually believe is in really quite good condition and I'm really satisfied with. Just grabbed a grease nipple out of it. There's a bolt here on the side, and I'm going to get that powder coated, and I reckon it's going to look super. The frame, I'm going to do that as well. It's going to be great. Rear stand. Then I've elected to get the springs off the front end. I have separated the arms, and I'm going to get them powder coated for durability. The spacers, the gear the brake pedal mount, the engine plates, and then pieces of the front end. I still have to knock off the bearing cup at the bottom, which looks like it's a separate piece. I'm not getting those little nuts done, but that's about it. That's what I think should get powder coated. Let's have a look at the bits for paint. Don't end up with a lot of space when you blow a motorbike or two apart in your shed, and you're trying to woodwork at the same time. Now I've got the tank off. I'm gonna start sanding that and perhaps use some paint stripper first. Not sure what I'll do, but I'm gonna have a go. Before I go too far at it, I'm gonna throw a liner kit in it and look for any holes. Of course, I've got the guards. Now the guards, in my opinion, are ready for a wipe over and just a scuff, and then an etch prime and a primer putty, and we'll see how they go. I've got the rear stand clip that I need to paint. Now I probably could pull it apart, but it articulates, and I've painted them before and had a pretty reasonable run, so that's what I'm going to do. I've got this piece off the gear change lever that I'm just gonna give a sand and a paint to, because I'm not sure I want to mess with that too much, because I don't really know how it works. It's got another nut and another washer. This appears to be one piece. I don't see any real need to get it powder coated. Leave it with me. Then I've got some little grease nipples, and the other job I've got is these studs from the footrest mount and the engine mount that I need to weld up and turn into bolts. See if I cannot make a mess of them. Well, I'm dirty, and I've only had a short time this week, but that's the end of Flat Tank Journey for this week. I'm going to hoof in and start throwing a little bit of paint around and doing a few of those boring jobs. The bike, it's blown apart and ready for powder.